I knew I wanted to do something. I knew I wanted to be my own boss. I'd never been to the Hamptons. I'd never worked in a food store. I'd never worked in a restaurant. I knew nothing about anything. When I look back now, I think it was somewhat between brave and crazy, but man, am I glad I did it. Well, the title came to me actually because I had always felt like I was really lucky. And in looking back and connecting the dots by writing a memoir, I realized I'd actually done a lot of work to be ready. And a friend of mine is Rob Marshall, who's the director, and he told me that when he was 25, he was the dance captain for a show on Broadway with Liza Minnelli. And Liza said to him something like, "Be ready when the luck happens." And I thought, oh, it's so interesting. I totally connected with it that, in fact, I wasn't just lucky, that I was ready when the luck happened. I think I overcame my childhood just by sheer determination. I had two different lives. I had a life at home, and I had a great life at school. I had friends, and I did well in school, and people thought I was smart, and I got along really well in school. So I had like this dichotomy, but at home it was pretty unhappy. I think my father was difficult with my brother and me. Yeah, I think remember it was the 50s. It was a different time. It wasn't a time of helicopter parents and people, fostering their children's inner feelings. It was a time when my father used to say being a parent isn't a popularity contest, which was to justify that what he wanted us to do, we should do, with no questions and no, not even looking at what the child wanted to do. It was, we should do what he wanted us to do, and that's not the way I'm built. I like to do what I want to do. And so I think that made it really difficult. But to some extent, I think I was physically afraid of my dad. Like I literally remember thinking he would kill me if I did something. So I was physically afraid of him. I think if there's a threat of violence, you're always afraid, even when it's not happening. So I basically spent my entire childhood in my bedroom with the door closed. And I think it was just protection. It was just to keep myself safe. And so I had a very lonely childhood. I think when I look back at my mom, I think she did the best she could. She really didn't know how to have a relationship, which is why I think as I've gotten older, having relationships is so important to me. I think she didn't want me to cook because she didn't want me in her space. She wanted me away from her. And so, again, my room was a safe haven. I made peace with my dad because he did one thing. He, in his own way, apologized. And my mom never acknowledged it. I think I wasn't brave when I was a kid. I think I was terrified. If I were brave when I was a kid, I would have stood up to them. And I would have said, I know this is what you want, but that's not what I'm going to do. I just wasn't about to spend my life like that. And I think a lot of times people make a decision to live their lives differently and they end up sliding back into what they feel is familiar. And I was determined not to do that. And then I met Jeffrey, and he just showed me a totally different way to live. He's such a kind, supportive, positive, and constantly kind of adoring guy. I mean, it's just been wonderful. It's just absolute 180 degrees from the way I grew up, where everything I did was wrong, and now everything I do is right. And probably neither of those are true. I think the key is in a good relationship is I knew that I was the most important thing in his life and that he was the most important thing in mine. And even though he was in Thailand or later when he was in Hong Kong, I just knew he would drop in everything if I needed something, and I would do the same for him. So I think probably because we didn't have kids, we had more freedom to pursue things. And also, he never prioritized his work over mine. In fact, it was probably quite the opposite. He wanted to make sure I was doing what I wanted to do, and then he figured out what he wanted to do.
In the book, there's something you've never shared before, that you did separate from Jeffrey for a very brief time.
I write cookbooks, so it's never been something I'd ever had any reason to share. Yeah. And I've known women since then who have found that they couldn't kind of change their relationships from husband and wife to partners. And remember, in the 70s, that's what Jeffrey expected. He expected that he was marrying a wife. And I don't know why, just those things kind of chafed, that it was expected that I would make dinner. That there are certain things that were expected, that he would pay the bills, that there were certain roles that we played, and I found them really annoying. And I couldn't quite get through, and I felt that if I just hit the pause button, that I would get his attention, and thank God I did. Thank God. Well, what happened was I had the first summer in the store, and I came back to Washington because that's where my life was, and Jeffrey was off to I think he did a 3-month international tour around the world. I mean, it was a huge thing from the State Department. And so he said, while I'm away, why don't you just stay in our house and figure out what you want to do? And then he was going away for 3 months. So I talked to him before he left, thinking it would be great for him to think about it while he was away, what he wanted to do. And then we decided to meet in California on the way back. And I think we both changed. We both had a lot of time to think on our own and what we wanted and what we wanted the other person to have the freedom to do. Jeffrey thought he didn't have the right to travel so much because he was the husband. And I think we just kind of negotiated a different kind of relationship, which was more of a partnership than it was a traditional relationship. We don't fight. We don't. I think it's more because Jeffrey wants whatever I want. So it's pretty hard to fight with somebody like that. Anyway, no, we really don't fight. And Jeffrey comes at things, and I think it's wonderful, is you want this, and I want that, and let's see how we can do both of them. And so you can't fight with somebody like that. I actually called Jeffrey the first feminist because I remember him coming home one day. He was in the military and I was in school, and it was 11 o'clock in the morning, and I was watching That Girl on TV. And it was a story about a young woman who was living on her own in New York, which was really somehow dramatic at that time. Yeah. And he turned to me and he said, you need to figure out what to do with your life. If you don't do that, you won't be happy. And it had never occurred to me. I mean, the goal had always been when I was a kid to get married, and I'd gotten married. And I'd married a really lovely guy, but he's the first person who said, you need to do something. And I'm so grateful because it really changed my life. I bet Jeffrey thinks I'm going to make a twist on chicken. Well, you know what? I'm going to rock his world. I'm going to make pasticcio, which is like a Greek lasagna. I couldn't imagine my being on TV. I just couldn't imagine why anybody would want to watch it. And a very nice woman, Eileen Opatet at Food Network, kept coming back and saying, I really think you'd be great at this. And I think probably over a year and a half, I kept saying no. And I had the feeling she thought I was negotiating, but I wasn't. I was just like, I don't want to do this. A friend saw a show in Australia, and he said, you should really see this show. And I asked Food Network to get it for me, and they did. And I thought it was really well done, but it was Nigella Lawson. And I thought, I'm not Nigella Lawson. So the woman at Food Network found the producer and asked her to call me. And we had this really interesting conversation. She realized I wasn't Nigella Lawson, that I was myself, and I was different. And somehow they convinced me to do 13 shows, and I thought, okay, I'll do 13 shows. Then they'll see I'm right. It's not going to work out. And I guess the rest is history. It's Jeffrey and my 40th wedding anniversary. I can't believe it. And I thought for main course, it'd be really nice to have Italian wedding soup. Well, we got a lot of people asking if they could be on the show. And my assistant came into my office one day and said, I think I did something terrible. She'd gotten a letter from Jennifer Garner saying she'd like to be on the show, and sent her a very nice letter back, as we do with most, with people who ask, saying, but these are Ina's actual friends. And she came in and said, I didn't know it was Jennifer Garner. So shortly after that, I don't know how long after that, we were doing a show in LA. And so I called Jennifer and asked if we could film something together. And we did. And it happened to be her birthday. I think it was her 40th birthday. And she very sweetly invited me to her birthday party, which is amazing. And I loved it because it was 40 women that were invited in their sweat clothes, and they were instructed not to have their hair done or anything. Hair in a ponytail, sweat clothes, and sneakers. And they were wonderful, wonderful women and it was a very good time. Yeah, she actually just did be my guest, which was really fun. I love that she does this pretend cooking show, which I think she designed after, like as a spoof of Barefoot Contessa, which is just great. It's really great.
Today on the Pretend Cooking Show, we're gonna make cacio e pepe scrambled eggs. They are, of course, by my queen, Ina.
And she's just extraordinary. I just admire her enormously. How do we spend our time now?
Yeah.
Well, we live in East Hampton, and I work at the barn right across from the house. Jeffrey has an office in town, which is 4 blocks away. And we pretty much work mornings intensely. In the mornings, we meet for lunch and do whatever we want in the afternoon. I don't make like a 3-course dinner, which I think used to be expected, but we go out a lot with friends and order out a lot, and because I'm testing recipes all day. I don't want to go home and start making dinner again. I love writing cookbooks. Yeah, and actually I'm going to do, after the next cookbook, I'm going to do a design book, so that'll be a new challenge. I don't think I'll retire. And I think, I love to keep doing what I'm doing.